The night was supposed to be ordinary, quiet, warm, and filled with the little gestures that had once made Evelyn Grace believe love could withstand anything. The table was neatly arranged, her favorite meal, creamy garlic pasta with sun-dried tomatoes steamed softly beneath the golden glow of candlelight. She wore the soft lavender dress, Cole once said, brought out the starlight in her eyes, and her heart fluttered like a bird waiting to be seen again. But the moment the door opened and Cole Harrington stepped in, something colder than the winter air followed him. His movements were sharp, precise, emotionless as if he had rehearsed them in front of a mirror made of ice. His usual greeting kiss never came. Instead, he loosened his tie, walked past the meal she spent hours preparing, and placed a thick, cream-colored folder on the edge of the table without a word. Evelyn blinked at it, confused. "What's this?" she asked, though some distant voice in her gut already screamed the answer. Cole didn't meet her eyes. "Divorce papers," he said flatly, his tone devoid of even the courtesy of pain. "I can't keep pretending, Evelyn. 10 years, and still no child. I need a family. I need an heir. This marriage is done." The words didn't land all at once. They crashed in slow motion, each syllable tearing through her heart like glass shards. Evelyn's fingers reached for the folder, trembling violently, as if it might bite her, or maybe wake her from a nightmare. Her mouth went dry, her voice lost in the storm that suddenly erupted inside her chest. She had sacrificed everything, her own dreams, her youth, her mental peace, believing that love was enough, that he was enough. She was there when Cole was nothing more than a dreamer, with a cluttered desk and coffee-stained blueprints, cheering him on when investors laughed at his ideas, staying up all night building pitch decks with him, believing in his brilliance even when he didn't. She had stood silently when his mother whispered venom into her ears about her being a pretty vase with no flowers. When the test results came back month after month, empty and hopeless, she endured countless needles, procedures, heartbreaks, in hospital rooms that smelled like sterile loss. She smiled through the pain, hoping that one day the universe would gift her what her heart yearned for: a child, a family, a fuller version of their love. But all she got was a folder, paper that meant erasure. Evelyn stared at Cole, begging his eyes to flicker with something: regret, hesitation, humanity, but he was already emotionally gone, his eyes fixed on some invisible future that no longer included her. "It's not personal," he said, as if those words could soften the cruelty of his betrayal. "It's necessary." And just like that, a decade of love, memories, struggles, laughter, and intimate dreams was reduced to legal pages, silent signatures, and a heart shattering without sound. Her breath hitched as tears formed, but didn't fall. They clung to her lashes like broken promises. "You don't mean this," she said, a last attempt to touch the man she once knew. But Cole only adjusted his watch, nodded mechanically, and turned away. No hug, no goodbye, no glance over his shoulder. Evelyn stood there, frozen, abandoned in the echo of everything they used to be. The pasta now cold and untouched, the candlelight flickering weakly against the tide of darkness that had flooded her life. As the door clicked shut behind him, she slid into the chair, staring blankly at the papers that ended her forever in a single evening. And the silence around her wasn't just quiet, it was mourning, heavy, unbearable, and filled with the ghost of a love that had died long before she noticed. The silence after Cole's departure was not peace, it was punishment, a vacuum that swallowed Evelyn whole, leaving only echoes of the life she thought she had. The once vibrant penthouse became a tomb of memories, each corner reminding her of laughter that had long since faded, of kisses that no longer belonged to her. She couldn't bear to breathe the same air that had carried his goodbye, so she packed what little strength she had, a few clothes, old photographs, and the painting he once gifted her on their first anniversary, and moved to a modest one-bedroom apartment tucked away in a quiet corner of the city where no one knew her name or her broken story. The walls were thin, the heater clunky, but at least the pain didn't echo quite as loudly there. Days passed in a slow blur, stopped counting them. Mornings bled into afternoons, and nights were just silent wars between sleep and sorrow. She barely ate, barely moved, just sat by the window with hollow eyes, watching strangers live lives she no longer believed she could have. Her phone rang off in autumn, her old friends, even her doctor, but she let them all go to voicemail, unwilling to speak in a world that had spoken so cruelly to her. One afternoon, Weakened by days of grief and the weight of her hollow stomach, she forced herself out to buy a box of crackers and ginger tea, thinking perhaps if she moved, the ache would lessen. But as she stepped onto the sunlit sidewalk outside the grocery store, the light above her seemed to dim, the street swayed, and a cold wave swept over her skin. Her knees buckled. Everything spun. The sound of rushing footsteps and gasps faded into a low hum as her vision darkened. When she awoke, it was to the sterile brightness of a hospital room, the sharp scent of antiseptic stinging her senses, and the soft beep of machines beside her. Panic fluttered in her chest. Had she fainted? Was something wrong? A nurse offered her water and a gentle smile. But it wasn't until the doctor walked in tall, calm, holding a chart that the air in the room truly shifted. "Mrs. Harrington," he began, his voice a gentle blend of caution and warmth. "You're pregnant." Evelyn stared at him, unmoving, her lips parting slightly, unable to process the words that had just pierced through the fog of her pain. Pregnant? The word repeated itself like a ghost she'd given up on years ago. Her heart stuttered, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak, and her voice finally emerged, weak and raspy. Are you sure?" The doctor smiled, small but genuine. "Yes, you're nearly 5 weeks along. Your body is under stress, but the baby is stable." Tears flooded her vision before she could stop them. She turned her face away, covering her mouth, a choked sob breaking through her chest. It wasn't just the news, it was the timing, the cruel irony of it all. Just when the man she'd loved more than life had discarded her for being barren, the universe whispered a miracle into her womb. She wasn't broken. She wasn't incapable. She had always carried hope within her literally. But now that hope felt bittersweet, wrapped in pain and betrayal. She rested her hand slowly over her stomach, as if trying to feel life where death had lived only days before. "You hear that, little one?" she whispered through tears. "You exist, and your daddy will never know what he threw away." The doctor quietly exited, understanding that this moment was bigger than medicine. Evelyn lay there, bathed in fluorescent light and tangled sheets. No longer just a woman abandoned, but a mother-to-be, carrying within her the most unexpected revenge life could offer, not hatred, not bitterness, but the miracle of creation. Her heart still ached for the man who left her, but somewhere in that pain, a tiny heartbeat had begun, and it pulsed stronger than any memory of Cole's betrayal. She had been crushed, erased, dismissed, but now, life surged within her, stubborn and sacred. And though she didn't yet know what the future held, for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than loss. She felt purpose. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the beginning of her rising. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the tiny socks she had just folded, white cotton with little golden stars stitched across the top of her fingers, trembling as she placed them carefully into the baby drawer beside the crib she'd assembled alone. The silence in her apartment was now filled with soft preparations for a new life. Lullaby music humming faintly in the background, sunlight brushing against pastel curtains, the scent of baby lotion already lingering in the air. But peace was fragile. Outside her little sanctuary, the world buzzed with rumors like bees in a broken hive. A cashier at the pharmacy had whispered about Evelyn's gentle smile and visible bump. A neighbor mentioned her name at a local hair salon, wondering aloud if the woman who once belonged to the Harrington legacy was now carrying someone else's child. Gossip spread like wildfire through elite circles where names were currency and secrets were the most valuable stock. But Cole remained untouched, basking in the hollow glamour of his new life. His photos with Brielle Hastings, the Khamsa were Ashrun, year-old model with a surgically perfected smile and an appetite for the spotlight, were splashed across every digital screen and glossy tabloid cover. At gala events, she clung to his arm like a designer accessory, whispering in his ear, laughing too loudly, kissing him like the cameras were her oxygen. Cole played the role with expert ease, always in tailored suits, always emotionless, as though Evelyn and their past had been swept into a locked vault he had no intention of reopening. Meanwhile, Evelyn shielded her baby bump beneath oversized coats and quiet routines, walking with her head down, not from shame, but from a desire to protect what was sacred. She didn't owe the world her truth, not yet. She had carried this child through the ashes of abandonment, through nights curled in pain, through mornings fueled only by soft hope and prenatal vitamins. But truth, like life, finds a way. One morning, as she returned home carrying a sonogram picture tucked inside a children's book from the thrift store, she found Autumn Cole's younger sister waiting by her door. Dressed in jeans and a warm cardigan, Autumn's eyes filled with a storm of emotion the moment she saw Evelyn. "You're really pregnant," she whispered, stepping forward, her hand reaching instinctively toward the small round curve beneath Evelyn's coat. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded, her lips parting without words. Autumn pulled her into a tight embrace, and for the first time in months, Evelyn allowed someone else to hold a part of her burden. Inside, over cups of herbal tea, Autumn spoke with urgency laced in love. "He has no idea, Evie. He thinks you've moved on, that you're done. But he doesn't know this baby exists. He needs to know." Evelyn's eyes hardened, though they brimmed with unshed tears. "He made his decision. He left me when I was at my weakest. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't wonder what was left behind. He walked away, Autumn. And I won't let this child be treated like an afterthought or a fix for his guilt." Autumn reached for her hand. "This isn't about guilt. It's about truth. He still talks like you're a closed chapter. But I see the way his eyes dim when your name slips into the room. He doesn't know the miracle he abandoned." Evelyn pulled her hand away gently. "And maybe that's for the best. This baby won't grow up as a legacy to his empire. This child will know love without conditions, without being weighed down by a name carved into cold glass buildings. I won't let Collier his world turn something so pure into a possession." Autumn's voice dropped, quiet and sincere. "I only want what's best for both of you. And I think deep down, you still love him." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Loving him doesn't mean I have to let him back in. Sometimes, love isn't enough." The room fell into a hush, broken only by the gentle ticking of a clock and the soft rustle of wind outside. But fate had no intention of resting. That very evening, Evelyn's photobelly visible, expression serene surfaced on a social media account run by a local influencer who happened to see her at the farmer's market. The caption didn't name her, but hashtags screamed, "Mystery Mom" and "Billionaire Ex-Wife." Within hours, it was picked up by gossip blogs. And though Cole hadn't seen it yet, the storm had already begun to brew. Evelyn sat by her window as thunderclouds rolled in, unaware that her silence was about to be shattered. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within, her eyes watching the sky darken. Somewhere out there, the man who discarded her was about to discover the truth that would unravel everything he thought he knew, and nothing would ever be the same again. Rain tapped against the windows of Cole Harrington's skyscraper office, as he stared blankly at the financial reports sprawled across his desk, numbers bleeding red, margins tightening like a noose, headlines flashing on news sites, questioning his leadership at Harrington Global. The once unshakable empire he built on power, logic, and calculated ambition was now teetering, not from outside forces alone, but from betrayal within. Anonymous board members had started a silent coup, leaking sensitive data, twisting narratives and whispers behind boardroom doors, and dragging his name through media mud under false headlines. Lawsuits emerged from nowhere. Documents with ghost signatures appeared in folders he didn't authorize, and every answer led only to more chaos. But among the storm, one signature stopped him cold, hidden in a buried clause tied to the estate: Evelyn Grace Harrington. It was dated after the divorce, sealed on a property contract for a trust fund that had never been activated. His pulse quickened, a strange mixture of confusion and dread rising in his throat. She had refused the alimony, torn up the check, vanished without a word, and yet there she was, woven silently into his financial life, like a phantom he couldn't shake. Fueled by questions he wasn't ready to answer, Cole burst into his sister's office, slamming the folder down between them. "Why the hell is Evelyn still tied to my holdings?" he demanded. His voice clipped and sharp, but his eyes, betraying more than fury, trembled with guilt, with fear. Autumn looked up slowly, her face drained of color, her eyes glassy, heavy with things she'd carried too long. "Because she never wanted your money," she whispered, voice trembling. "She signed it to protect you. That property, she made it unreachable in court if things ever went wrong. She said you were too trusting of your partners. She was right." Cole stepped back, like the air had been knocked from his lungs. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too full of a truth he wasn't prepared for. "She did that? For me?" he asked, quieter now, almost childlike. Autumn nodded. "She was the only one who didn't want anything from you but your heart. And when you broke it, she still guarded yours. The words hung in the air like 1,000 unspoken apologies. His mind reeled backward memories of Evelyn gently urging him to double-check contracts, of her voice cautioning him about certain partners, her quiet eyes always seeing more than he did, always loyal, always steady. And now she was gone. Gone without demanding anything, without even showing the anger he so deserved. Panic replaced pride. He turned and walked out without another word, his thoughts a tornado. He checked her old apartment empty, her studio downtown sold. The nonprofit charity she once supported she had withdrawn her name months ago. He paid private investigators, pulled surveillance, searched credit card logs, but everything she touched had been wiped clean, like she was erasing herself from his world thread by thread. Each place he searched gave him pieces, but never the whole. A florist remembered her asking for lilies, but paid in cash. A taxi driver recalled her soft voice, but no destination. The trail was fading, just like the warmth she once gave him without measure. And with every dead end, Cole realized he hadn't just lost a wife. He had abandoned a soul who had rooted herself into his life in 1,000 invisible ways. Evelyn had been his lighthouse, quietly guiding him while he sailed blindly toward storms, and he destroyed that light without blinking. His chest ached with a grief he couldn't justify and a love he didn't know how to fix. He found himself in the nursery they once talked about, an empty room in his penthouse that still had the unopened box of the crib Evelyn picked out 5 years ago, its corners collecting dust. He sat on the floor, defeated, the silence around him screaming. His empire was crumbling, but what broke him most wasn't the headlines. It was the realization that the one person who ever truly loved him had disappeared, carrying something he now sensed was much greater than even she had let on. And for the first time in his life, Cole Harrington had everything: money, fame, a skyline in his name, but not the one thing he now knew he couldn't live without: her. The city glistened under a cold curtain of rain, the kind that blurred car lights into streaks of memory, the kind that made the world feel suspended in time, and that's when he saw her. Evelyn stood beneath the drooping arms of an old willow tree in the park they once claimed as their secret place, the same park where laughter echoed like dreams and kisses, were promises not yet broken. She was dressed in a long beige coat, damp at the hem, one hand resting gently on the curve of her belly, now visibly full of the life he never knew he left behind. Her hair clung to her cheeks in soft waves, her profile framed by the soft glow of a flickering lamppost, and in that single breath, Cole felt the weight of every mistake collapse upon him. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat was too tight, too choked by the storm inside him. All he could do was stand there in the rain, drenched in guilt, in memories, in aching regret, watching the woman he still loved breathing through a pain he had caused. Evelyn didn't flinch. She didn't look at him. She only whispered, her voice low and steady. "You didn't even ask." The words struck sharper than any scream. "You just left." Cole swallowed hard, his voice cracking under the pressure of the storm. "I thought I was sparing you," he said, trembling, "but I didn't know I was destroying the only part of me that was still alive." Silence stretched between them, thick as the air, until Evelyn slowly turned to face him. Her eyes, though tired, still burned with the quiet fire. He remembered the fire that once believed in him when no one else did. "You gave up on me," she said, no anger in her voice, only the hollow ache of truth. "When I needed you most." And then it happened. Cole dropped to his knees in the mud, not out of dramatics, but because he didn't have the strength to stand in front of the truth anymore. He reached out slowly, reverently, and pressed his trembling hands against the soft rise of her belly, feeling a warmth radiating from within that both comforted and crushed him. "Is it mine?" he asked, not daring to breathe. Evelyn's lips parted, and tears welled in her eyes, shining like the raindrops racing down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. A sob escaped him, and he leaned forward, pressing a kiss not to her lips, not yet but to her belly, to the life he never imagined he'd fathered, to the miracle he had almost lost forever. Then, with tender hands, he kissed her fingertips, as if to ask for permission to touch her soul again. When she didn't pull away, he stood and gently cupped her face, his lips brushing against her soft, slow, hesitant, like a prayer spoken after years of silence. Her breath caught, but she didn't resist. Her hands found their way to his soaked shoulders, and for a moment the rain didn't matter, nor did the past. Only the now. Only this heartbeat between them. "I've never stopped loving you, Evelyn," he whispered against her lips. Not for 1 second. And there beneath the willow tree that once heard their dreams and now bore witness to their wounds, they stood wrapped in rain and redemption, lost in a moment that rewrote everything. No grand speeches, no forgiveness forced, just two broken hearts, finding their way back through the storm, with a child between them, and the fragile hope that maybe love, though wounded, had never truly died. The quiet after the kiss didn't last long. Word of Cole's reunion with Evelyn spread like wildfire, setting off a storm that ignited every corner of his carefully constructed world. The media, always hungry for scandal, pounced with headlines spinning tales of betrayal, redemption, and backstabbing romance. Cole's family, who had once welcomed Evelyn but later sided with tradition and legacy, erupted in confusion and fury. His mother, Margaret Harrington-Stern, and status-obsessed, called it a sentimental disaster and accused Evelyn of manipulating her way back into the family through pregnancy. But none reacted with more venom than Betrayal. Beautiful, photogenic, and dangerously ambitious, Betrayal wasn't accustomed to losing, and certainly not to a woman she had spent months mocking behind closed doors. Publicly, she painted herself as the victim, a woman deceived, heartbroken, and discarded. Privately, she raged. She began orchestrating a smear campaign, leaking altered screenshots of old messages, feeding rumors to tabloids, even arranging for paparazzi to trail Evelyn's every move in hopes of catching her in a compromising moment. The pressure was unrelenting, but Evelyn stood unshaken. Gone was the quiet, heartbroken woman who once curled into silence. This Evelyn had been forged through betrayal, tempered by loss, and was now driven by a deeper purpose: to protect the child growing within her and to reclaim her voice, not just for herself but for every woman who had ever been discarded after giving her all. The breaking point came at a charity gala hosted by the Harrington Foundation, an event Evelyn hadn't planned to attend, but Autumn urged her. Dressed in an elegant, off-shoulder emerald gown that flowed over her baby bump like river silk, Evelyn walked in with quiet dignity, flanked by Autumn and a few old allies who had once admired her strength but never truly understood it. Betrayal saw it as her moment. With cameras flashing and the press in full swarm, she stepped forward and staged her ambush at the mic, claiming Cole had been emotionally manipulated, that Evelyn had planned the pregnancy to gain back her status. The room buzzed, the air heavy with tension, but Evelyn stepped forward, calm as stone, her eyes never leaving Betrayal's. "You wanted the CEO," she said, her voice cutting through the room like silk through glass. "But you never had the man. You can't buy a soul." The silence that followed was deafening. Reporters froze. Guests stared. Even Betrayal's smile faltered. Evelyn turned away with grace, leaving the mic and walking back to her seat with more power than 1,000 headlines could carry. That moment shattered Betrayal's illusions, and Cole saw it all. He saw the difference between presence and performance, between a woman who needed attention and one who commanded it. The very next morning, Cole walked into the Harrington Global boardroom with fire in his chest. Half the board had betrayed him during the internal coup, siding with short-term profits and public image. With legal clarity and unshakable resolve, he terminated 5 of the senior board members, exposed their backdoor dealings, and dissolved their voting rights within the week. Investors were stunned, but those loyal to him rallied. In the days that followed, he reshaped his company from the inside out, no longer obsessed with dominating markets, but with building a sustainable legacy his child could one day inherit proudly. Evelyn watched all of this from a distance, not because she wasn't involved, but because she trusted him to walk the fire alone. She had walked hers. Now it was his turn. At night, when he returned to her modest home, exhausted and often wordless, she'd simply rest her head on his shoulder, their baby between them. No titles, no companies, just a man, a woman, and the fragile threads of a rebuilt bond. Margaret visited once, reluctantly, and saw Evelyn cradling her stomach, sunlight falling through the curtains like forgiveness. She didn't apologize, not with words, but her eyes lingered longer than usual, and when she left, she touched Evelyn's hand. That was enough for now. Betrayal, defeated publicly and privately, vanished from the city's social scene, her fall from grace sharp and swift, her spotlight reclaimed by the woman she underestimated. But Evelyn didn't celebrate her downfall. She had no time for revenge when there was life to nurture, a nursery to decorate, and late-night cravings to indulge with ice cream and laughter. The storm had raged, yes, But love had rooted itself deeper through a tan now. Even amid chaos, Cole and Evelyn were finally building something they never had before. Peace. The soft lull of wind outside the window blended with the rhythmic creak of the rocking chair as Evelyn held Aurora close to her chest, the newborn's breath warm against her skin, tiny fingers curled around one strand of her mother's hair. The nursery, once an empty room echoing broken dreams, now glowed with soft pastels and moon-shaped nightlights, filled with the gentle scent of baby powder, fresh linen, and a peace that had taken years to earn. Evelyn watched as Aurora stirred, her ocean blue eyes fluttering open for a brief moment, glancing up in that tender, soul-searching way only babies do, that held the same fire and fragility as Cole's. Just a few feet away, the crib stood complete, its edges smooth, its mobile spinning softly with stars and clouds that mirrored the ones they had wished upon long ago. On the side table lay a small, folded envelope sealed with a wax imprint of a tiny sun, the same symbol Cole once etched into the corners of his journals during the early days of their love. Curiosity stirred, and with one arm still gently wrapped around Aurora, Evelyn reached for it. Her fingers trembled not from fear, but from the quiet ache of a heart that had endured so much and finally found rest. She recognized his handwriting before she even opened the flap. It was steady, bold, and unshaken, just like the man who had returned to her not with grand apologies, but with actions that rewrote the past. As the paper unfolded, she read, "To my little star, you were born from silence, from heartbreak, but also from hope. Your mother is the bravest soul I know. I lost her once because I didn't listen. I will never make that mistake again. You, Aurora, are the heartbeat of a love story that refused to die. Forever yours, Dad." Tears slipped down Evelyn's cheeks, not of sorrow but of sacred gratitude. A silent thank you to the universe for giving her this full-circle moment. The man who broke her had returned, healed, and become someone worthy not only of forgiveness but of legacy. She pressed the letter to her heart and kissed Aurora's forehead gently, whispering promises of a world filled with softness and strength. Downstairs, Cole stood by the fireplace, unaware she had found the letter. He stared into the flames, lost in thought, cradling a small stuffed bunny he had bought the day she went into labor. It still had the ribbon tied unevenly around its neck because his hands had been shaking too hard to fix it. When Evelyn entered the room, baby in arms, letter still tucked into her sweater, Cole looked up and met her eyes not as a CEO or a man trying to make amends, but as a father, a partner, and a believer in second chances. She said nothing, simply walked toward him and placed Aurora gently in his arms. The baby yawned, as if even she understood the serenity of that moment. Cole kissed the top of her head and then looked at Evelyn, overwhelmed by everything he could never put into words. "She's perfect," he whispered. Evelyn nodded. "She's ours." They stood in silence, no more storms between them, no more questions left unasked. The world outside still spun, still judged, still speculated, but within their home, within this rebuilt love, there was only truth. Later that evening, they watched the rain fall from the balcony, much like the night they reunited under the willow tree. Aurora slept peacefully in the bassinet beside them, and Evelyn leaned her head on Cole's shoulder, her hand over his heart. "We made it," she whispered. "Somehow." Cole kissed her temple, his voice breaking with emotion. "Not somehow, because you never stopped believing, even when I didn't deserve it." She smiled softly, closing her eyes. And for the first time in years, the silence wasn't painful. It was healing. It was full. It was the sound of love that had weathered every storm and still found its way home.